Hello everybody, Sweet Tea Killer here. What I'm going to do here today is I'm going to show you some basic electrical work. We're going to install a switch, we're going to install a receptacle, and we're also going to install a fluorescent lighting ballast. Those are three very common things that are in homes that go bad, or you may want to change them out for one reason or another. So before we get to the fun stuff, I have to do this disclaimer. Electricity is very fact dependent. What you see here may not be exactly what you have in your house. I would love to help answer questions, but keep in mind that if there's one thing that you didn't mention in your question, I won't be able to predict that whenever I go to answer it. Second thing, before you ever mess with electricity, before you ever work with it, before you take a receptacle or anything out of the wall, I want you to keep in mind to turn the power off. Electricity is not something to be played with. So, all of that out of the way, let's get to the basics of what we're doing. And it's always a good idea to draw a picture of what you're going to be doing. And that's what I've done right here. So we have 3 boxes. We're gonna have, this is our power, where our power comes in. Everything is already terminated in this box. This is our receptacle, and this is our switch. So we're gonna have our main power or line power come in to this box. It's gonna make a junction here, but it's not gonna go to the receptacle. Then the line power is going to go from there over to this box to the switch, and then this red line is what's known as a switch leg. It's going to go back to the receptacle, and the receptacle is eventually going to be plugged into by the light. So now that we have our picture, we're going to go to some basic tools. These are my personal tools. When you're buying tools that you're going to be using somewhat often, or even maybe not as often, you get what you pay for. These are not the cheapest on the market by any means whatsoever. These are not the most expensive on the market. You can buy more expensive tools, but these are the tools that I found that work for what I do. This is a digital multimeter. It's very good for household electricity. You can measure amperage, voltage, as well as continuity, which we'll get to later in the video. This is a plug-in tester. You can plug it into a receptacle that has power to it, and the lights on the bottom will tell you exactly if there's anything wrong with it, what's wrong. This, excuse me, is my favorite screwdriver. This is an 11-in-1. It's made by Klein Tools. It's my personal favorite screwdriver because it literally has 11 different ways to turn a screw. They have a lot of different names. I believe on the package it says Lyman's pliers. They're known as Kleins. Some people use them as hammers, and I don't recommend that, but it will work. These are wire strippers. They're not the automatic ones. You hold in, you grip the wire in the teeth on the corresponding size, hold the wire, and pull outwards, and the sheathing, the insulation sheathing, will come off. So that's what those are. So now that we've covered the basic tools that we're going to be using, let's actually get into the work. Now, just like the picture that I showed you earlier, you have your receptacle and your switch and then your light. Receptacle, switch, and your light. So the first thing we're going to do is hook up the switch, being that technically, if you drew the circuit out in a line diagram, it would come first. So your main power here is what they call feeding through this box and coming to here. And when you hook up a switch, this is called a single pole switch, and it has 2 screws on it for your line power and your switch leg. And then you have your ground screw. It is very important always to ground your devices if it has means to ground it, because the ground is your protection against being electrocuted or everything heating up because of overcurrent and starting a fire. So it's very important that this is connected. So just make sure this is tightened down good here. Okay. So then it doesn't matter which one of these is hooked up first, as long as they're not on the same screw. So the neat thing about this particular switch is whenever you loosen these screws, it actually has a clamp of sorts in there, and you can get the wire stripped out, maybe 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch. You take the wire, just stick it in that little clamp, hold it there, and tighten it down. Now this goes back to why I like this screwdriver so much. You can use a Phillips head, a flat head, or a square bit. And this basically is just square, and it has a square hole in there. And you can tighten it down, you have less chance of actually stripping the screw out. So, I want to talk about this wire for a second. This right here, obviously it's white, and that normally indicates neutral. However, in any application where a white wire is not a neutral, it needs to be indicated with a piece of black tape. If it's a hot wire, or in this case a switch leg, it needs to have a piece of black tape on it to indicate that it's not a neutral, it's actually what's known as a current carrying conductor. So now that that's out of the way, just like the black wire, our line power, we're going to hook the switch leg up the same way. Now, if you're wondering why I don't have to strip any of this stuff out, I did a little bit of prep work beforehand just to cut time and so that you could see everything as it's supposed to go in. So that right there is a single pole switch completely hooked up. Now, used to they would have an on and off actually on the switch, but they don't have that anymore. So what you want to watch out for, and I've done this myself, you want to look, and on the metal, etched into the metal, it'll say top. That side obviously goes to the top. Now we come over to our receptacle box. Now remember, I said that this switch leg has to be marked, and it has to be marked at both ends. So that means our switch leg is going to go where our hot wire would go, because in this case that is our hot wire. It does not have black tape on it. It is actually a neutral. So when you look at a receptacle, you have a brass or gold screw, and then you have a silver screw. And neutrals are usually white. So white, silver. Now, I forgot to mention this a minute ago, but whenever you put these screws in, whenever you put the wires on the screws, when you make the little shepherd's hook, you want the loop to go the same way that you're going to be turning the screw. So in this case, it's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, just like normal. So make the hook go in the same direction as the screw does. Sometimes, and I ran into this whenever I was new in the field, and I saw where as I tightened the screw, the loop was the wrong way, and it actually pushed the wire out of the terminal here. Now that we have our neutral, we are going to hook up the switch leg, the one with the black tape on it, to our receptacle. And see, my screwdriver didn't slip one single bit. If I'd used the flathead or the Phillips head, it would actually take more time. So we have to do a little bit more prep work. We have to change some stuff out, and we'll be right back. Bye. Okay, so we have our switch and our receptacle mounted. They're secured, good to go. We're not going to put plates on them because this isn't a final install. It's just teaching basic concepts and installation practices. So what we're going to do next is we're going to install it's already installed, we're going to attach the wires for the fluorescent lighting ballast. Now again, make sure whenever you do this that the power is disconnected. There is no power here. I know because I turned it off and I've already checked it. Just about every single ballast that I've ever seen has a picture of the wiring diagram on it. And it'll tell you how many lamps it can use and how to hook it up based on how many lamps you're using. In this case, just like the picture, we're using 2 lamps. So we're going to hook it up according to what the picture says. So we have a red that goes to both lamps. We have a red wire right here and a red wire coming out of the ballast. So you strip them out, maybe a little tiny bit more than you did the wiring for the switch and the receptacle, and you put them next to each other. The ends should be even as you can get them, and then take an orange wire nut. And I say orange because the color of the wire nut dictates the size that it's made for. So you don't want one of the really big blue ones, but you also don't want one of the little tiny blue ones. Orange ones will work just fine here. And if you have any exposed copper wire sticking out the bottom, take the wire nut off, cut it, and then put it back on. Because you don't want that touching any of the vast amount of metal that's in here. So then, of course, just like the picture says, we're going to hook up these 2 blue wires to these 2 blue wires. It doesn't matter which one goes to which one. The thing you want to make sure of is you don't tie the 2 blue wires coming out of the ballast together. That will create an overcurrent condition and will burn out your ballast. I've done it before. Basically, it makes a little bit of noise and then a giant puff of smoke comes out and you have black marks everywhere. So we're going to take, just like we did before, no copper showing. And no copper showing. Now that is the majority of the of the wiring that we have to hook up, besides our line power and the neutral. And you want to get these bundled pretty tightly together, because you don't want them, whenever you put the cover that goes on here, it's thin. This is thin metal, just like this part is and just like the cover is. You don't want that thin metal nicking your wire and causing a short somewhere. So, and we'll deal with the red wire in just a second. So, hook up your line power. Excuse me, your neutral. Then we hook up the line power. And that's it. After we take this, kind of bunch it up here. Everything's hooked up. I'm going to grab my multimeter real quick, and now we're going to do some tests. So the first test I want to do is make sure that nothing is grounded out. So basically what you want to do, from your neutral and your line power, here as well as here, we want to make sure that there's no continuity to ground. And what that means is there's no path for the electricity to flow to get to ground, to pop a breaker, to cause excessive heat, things like that. So this is a practice that I always do whenever I turn my meter on to test continuity, is I turn it to continuity. It looks like the omega symbol. It's also resistance, and it has a little sound symbol right there. I'm not exactly sure what to call that. So turn it to that, and then touch the 2 leads together. That means you have continuity. If you hear that whenever you're testing for continuity to ground and you don't want continuity, that's a bad thing. That means that there's something that is grounded out somewhere. So we're going to touch our ground here, then we're going to touch our line power. Okay, nothing there. Same thing with the neutral. Nothing there. So now that we have everything hooked up, we tested the continuity here. We're going to test continuity right here to all of our boxes and make sure that everything is connected what it's supposed to and not connected to what it's not supposed to be. So just touch the ground here, and if you want to test it, you can also test it like this. That means the boxes are connected together. So we touch our line power side of the receptacle, nothing. Neutral side of the receptacle, nothing. Ground side, we should have continuity there. That's right. Also there. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the lamps in. We're going to plug everything in. We're going to turn the power on. We'll be right back. See you in a bit. Okay, so we have our cover put in that I mentioned before. We have our lamps installed, and we have our power wire for our lighting fixture plugged in. Now all we have to do is flip the switch. And that is the basics of installing a fluorescent light, a single pole switch, and a duplex receptacle. I want to thank you guys again for watching today. If you like what you see, hit the like button. And if you really like what you see and you want to see more, hit subscribe. And if you have something specific that you'd like to see, put it down in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to get a video made and showing you the safe but also the right way to do it. Thank you guys. Bye.